Hello there, fellow truth seekers. This is Doug coming to you once again on this here Shabbat. I hope all you folks have had a good week and been blessed. Thank all you folks that have, that watched the last video, and for those who have subscribed. One of the things that I want to talk about, I mean, just kind of in general. That is one of the reasons why I decided to do this particular study is beard just don't want to cooperate here, is about the weather stuff that's going on. I mean, like the sun, I've talked about it before, how just 5-6 years ago the sun was coming up like across like this here, say this is our building down here, and the road runs like this. The sun would come up in the morning from one side of it to the other, one corner to the other. Now the building's like this, and it's coming up like this, up across over like that. And back then it was still yellow tint. It had a yellow hue to it. And one of the things about it is that particular output of light was good for you. I could take and close my eyes and put my face up to the sun, and I mean, it was just like I was charging up my batteries or something. I mean, I could feel it just start coming up through my body up to, and because there's glands behind our eyes that produce hormones and stuff, like serotonin and melatonin and different stuff that affect our mood, affect our sleep patterns, and all that kind of stuff. Well, it's changed, and this sun is white hot. I mean, it is. I mean, we've had I talked to some of the people that's lived here all their life, older people, and all. They said they ain't never seen nothing like it. I mean, how hot it's been. I mean, it's even when the temperature is like only in the 90s or something, it feels like you're in an oven. And just the light coming off the sun is intense. I mean, it's just really, like being in an oven or something. And rain, we've had, in the last couple of months, I bet you we ain't had an inch of rain altogether. I mean, we had a little bit while ago. A storm came over, and the wind was blowing, it was thundering and all that stuff, and we got maybe 5 minutes worth of rain. And it done the same thing yesterday. Came up the day before, just a couple of minutes. And so what it led me to thinking about, earlier this week, and it's been like the Ruach has been impressing this on me. And about escalation. The escalation of judgment. And it takes, if, the Father says, I tell you the end from the beginning. So if you want to really understand the end times, you kind of got to go back to the Torah and look at things the way that they were happening, beginning at the very beginning, with the fall of man, the seed war, the incursion of the Watchers, the genetic corruption, to try and prevent the birth of the seed of the woman, the Mashiach. And when that didn't work out, then they went to plan B, which was to try and get all of mankind just wiped out. If you can't stop the one that's going to crush your head, then why not just go ahead and get it all wiped out? Well, of course, Noah was perfect in his generations, in his genetics. He was not genetically corrupted, and he was an upright man. He was a man who walked according to the ways of Elohim, and so he was spared. And then we come to the Exodus of Moses, after the Father had built a nation in Egypt, and he was ready to, the fullness of the Amorites had come. They had reached their pinnacle of sin, and so he was ready. All of those tribes that were there in Canaan were about at the pinnacle of their sinfulness, and so he was ready to bring an army and run them out. And you can see where through this, is like I've said before, that the Father uses people to accomplish His purposes. And Satan does the same thing. Hasatan does the same thing. He will use people to try to accomplish his purposes. And, for lack of a better term, it's like we're pawns on a chessboard, and we're being moved around and positioned according to the Father's plan. And, of course, every move he makes, Hasatan tries to counter it. He tries to do something to counter it, and of course he gets smacked down over and over again. And we can see this in the story of the Exodus, when Moses went there to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And it's kind of interesting that when you look at Revelation and you see these plagues and all this stuff that began to happen, that they parallel a lot of these here in Exodus. They're very similar. And so I'm going to start here in chapter 7 of Exodus, and I encourage you to read these, chapters. I mean, there's a bunch of chapters here, and I'm not going to try to read all of them. I'm going to read the about the plagues. And the Pharaoh had magicians and sorcerers that were court magicians, and two of them, the two that contended with Moses, was Jannes and Jambres. And you can go to 2 Timothy 3:8 and read, and I will go there and read about them and what it says about them contending with Moses. I've read a little bit about the history of them, and I think it's in the book of Jasher. It talks about them. They were sort of like magicians and sorcerers for hire. They went around from place to place at the behest of these emperors, pharaohs, kings, or whatever. They would send word to them, hey, I'll pay you, this much if you'll come and serve in my court. Because they also serve sort of as advisors. But they were supposedly, to counter other sorcerers and magicians that might be trying to put spells on you and hex you and all that stuff. So, it says, the Father had called him from among, the people he was living with there in Midian. And, when he saw the burning bush, and he went up there, and then he started telling him, that I'm going to use you. You're going to go. And of course he says, I can't speak. I'm not an orator or whatever, And he says, well, I'm going to send your brother with you, Aaron, because he could speak, And of course he said, and this is chapter 7, and Yahuwah said unto Moses, see, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh. So when he began to do these things, Pharaoh looked at Moses like a god, like he would their pantheon of gods, and they had a huge pantheon of about 11 gods that they served. And you know, it's funny that a lot of these plagues that befell them were really against those false gods, because they represented these different things like frogs and, you know, animals and insects and all this kind of stuff, how they, you know, were associated with them. And so he says, okay, I'm gonna send plagues, and let's just see what your gods that are supposedly over these things can do about it. And so it says, and the Lord said unto Moses, see, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brothers shall be thy prophet, or spokesman. Thou shalt speak all that I command thee, and Aaron thy brothers shall speak unto Pharaoh, that he send the children of Israel out of his land. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. But Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that I may lay my hand upon Egypt, and bring forth my armies and my people, the children, my armies. See, he's built up, you know, several million people over this period of time that, you know, since Jacob went with his family into Egypt, they had multiplied to, you know, tremendously, to like several million people. So that's why he's saying, my armies, bring forth my armies and my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great judgments. And the Egyptians shall know that I am Yahuwah, when I stretch forth my hand upon Egypt, and bring out the children of Israel from among them. And Moses and Aaron did as the Lord commanded them, so did they. And Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron 83 years old, 80 years old, when they spake unto Pharaoh. And Yahuwah spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, when Pharaoh shall speak unto you, saying, show a miracle for you, then thou shalt say unto Aaron, take thy rod and cast it before Pharaoh, and it shall become a serpent. And Moses and Aaron went in unto Pharaoh, and they did so as Yahuwah had commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. Then Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers. Now the magicians of Egypt, they also did in like manner with their enchantments. For they cast down every man his rod, and they became serpents. But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. And see, their doing this is an escalation. See, because every time they try to counter what the Father does, he escalates. And to the point where they cannot do it anymore. And then he said unto Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He refuses to let the people go. Get thee unto Pharaoh in the morning. Lo, he goeth out unto the water, and thou shalt stand by the river's brink. Against he come, and the rod which was turned to a serpent shalt thou take in thine hand, and thou shalt say unto him, Yahweh Elohim of the Hebrews has sent me unto thee, saying, let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. And behold, hitherto thou wouldest not hear. Thus saith Yahuwah, in this thou shalt know that I am Yahuwah. Behold, I will smite with the rod that is in mine hand upon the waters which are in the river, and they shall be turned to blood. And of course, here in Revelation, let's see, chapter 8, I believe it is. It says in chapter 8 and verse, well, here we go. let me go back and start at the beginning of the chapter. This is Revelation chapter 8. And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of a half hour. And I saw the seven angels which stood before Elohim, and to them were given seven trumpets. Now these are the trumpet judgments, and these are different from the wrath. You know, people say, oh, you know, we're not going to be going through this. Oh, yeah, we are. Yeah, if we live, we'll be going through this. We just won't be going through the wrath, which is the bowl judgments, the final judgments, which is poured out upon unrepentant man because they refuse to repent and they blaspheme the Father and the Messiah. It says, and when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about the space of half an hour. And I saw the seven angels which stood before Elohim, and to them were given seven trumpets. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before Elohim out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth, and there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and earthquake. And the seven angels which had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire, mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and the third part of trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. And the second angel sounded, and it, as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. And the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of water. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. Now, if you look up the word wormwood, okay, it's what they make absinthe from, which is a drink. And it was banned here in the United States, but they've since repealed it and allow it to be sold here again. And it's, I think it causes people to have, you know, like psychedelic kind of thing or something. I don't know. But anyway, it's bitter. From what I understand, it's real bitter. In Russia, in the Russian language, the word that they use for radiation is wormwood. And I think that this is, you know, may have already happened. You know, I'm not positive to that. I don't, but one of the reasons I think it, you know, may partially have happened is over in Japan in 2011, they had that big tsunami over there, and it took out 4 reactors at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station. And not only did it take the reactors out, but the spent fuel rod containment pools. Now, the Japanese had a really unique system the way they did it. You know, here in the United States, the spent rods are on the site, you know, of the nuclear power plant, because they've never made a definitive decision on a place to sequester it. You know, they've talked about it at that Yucca Mountain out west out there in Arizona somewhere, New Mexico, putting it down in there and sequestering it. But as of right now, all of the spent nuclear rods are stored on site in cooling pools. And like down there where I lived at, there was a nuclear power plant about 10 miles down the road from where my house was at. And as of right now, they had 40,000 pounds of spent rods stored in cooling pools. Because if they lose the cooling water, they go critical. They will begin to melt down. And they will explode and spew radioactive cesium-137 and then other isotopes and stuff into the air. And, well, that's what happened over in Japan. Whenever that tidal wave came in there, it damaged their backup generators to where they could not circulate cooling water over the reactors, and they went critical and they blew up. And the Japanese stored the rods, the spent rods, up in cooling tanks up above the reactors. So when they exploded, they took out those rods, those cooling tanks, took them out, and all them rods just went all over the place. And they just, one right behind the other, let go. I mean, these reactors, and all that cooling water and the water that they were pumping in there, all that water that was in the pumping system that was used to cool the reactors, all that water began to rush out, not to mention the water from the tsunami. And all that radioactive material, cesium and plutonium and the isotopes, deuterium and all that stuff, began to wash out into the ocean. And they have been flooding the ocean with water because they tried everything in the world. They tried freezing the water so that it could would stay solid. They put it in these big bags, bladders. They got thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of these great big huge bladders full of radioactive water all over the site there. And they finally just run out of it, and now they're just running water through there continually because those reactors are in meltdown. They're trying to keep them cool, and all that water, millions upon millions of gallons of water a day, and they're using the water out of the ocean. They just pumping water out of the ocean and flooding that stuff into the ocean. And what's funny is on the west coast of the United States, they had, from Washington State to Oregon, California, all down along California, they have radiation detectors so that if we get attacked or something, or if something like this happens, we get a warning that, here comes a cloud of radioactive smoke or dust or gas or whatever. They had to turn them off. They had to disable them because they were staying in a constant alarm. And there's been people that are scientists and all that have gone up there, and this one guy watched a documentary about it. I don't know if he was a scientist, but he was just an environmentalist or something that was concerned, and he went up there and began to see all of the tidal pool and creatures like starfish and mussels and oysters and crabs, and they were all dying. They were all dead. And not only that, but they've talked about up there in Alaska where the king crab, they just disappeared. And now some other kind of crab is invading up there. Emperor crabs or something. But, it's killing everything in the ocean. And they did, done some sampling of the water, and it's full of cesium-137, which is one of the isotopic byproducts of nuclear fission. And so, that sounds kind of like that to me. And it's like I said, the things that it talks about in here, these now granted they're with Egypt. That was the Father himself bringing about these plagues, and there will be some of these here that will be directly from him, especially when it gets to the bowl judgments. But a lot of this stuff here is stuff that we're doing to ourselves. I mean, like this here, that nuclear power plant going, 4 reactors, and man, they buried it. You don't hear nothing about it on the mainstream news media at all. And in fact, there for a while, they were censoring people. You can't talk about this. Why? Because they realize what it's doing. It's killing everything in the Pacific. And then, and the so-called half-life of this cesium is like 30 or 40 years. So for 30 or 40 years, this stuff's going to be, until it, fizzes out, it's going to be doing harm to stuff. And nobody knows the extent of it because they're covering it up. And of course, it's not just there, like up there in Washington State, that Hannaford nuclear facility up there where they make stuff for nuclear bombs. Some scientists went up there and done a whole bunch of studies and research around that place, and everything around there was radioactive. All the animals, all the snakes, all the insects, all the plants, everything. And that's a huge facility up there. And it's where they took whenever they work with nuclear material, they work with it in big tanks of water. Because water is like a shield. It prevents these high energy particles from escaping. They get absorbed into the water. And and it becomes heavy water after a while because it's just so bombarded by these high energy particles. And then they take that water and they just pump it into the ground. Pump it into underground, and maybe even just have an open pit and dump it into a big open pit. Just clay or something, they'll, try to find an area that's clay because clay tends to be impervious to water. But even that, eventually it will leak through it somewhere, and get into the regular ground and get into the groundwater, and it begins to contaminate everything. And then 3 Mile Island over there at Chernobyl, Wormwood. And that Chernobyl, the reactor, is burning down in the core of the reactor over there. Is burning down into the earth. That's how hot it is. I mean, it's just, melting the earth and the rock, the dirt, everything, melting it as it's going, and it's just continuing to go further and further down into the earth. And it's still and they encase that thing in hundreds of thousands of tons of concrete. And then the Europeans have gone over and built a great big dome over this thing. And everything for 50,000 square miles is contaminated. Everything. So you see the hand of man in this, into these things, and that's kind of where it's, it's just that when they sound the trumpet, I think it is sort of the trigger, if you will, of events that lead to these things happening, like the thing that happened there at Fukushima Daiichi, Chernobyl, these 3 Mile Island, which was like a warning to people. And so you see where here, the magicians, it says here that it says that thus saith Yahweh, in this thou shalt know that I am Yahweh. Behold, I will smite with the rod the water, and it turn to blood, and the fish that is in the river shall die, and the river shall stink, and the Egyptians shall loathe to drink of the water of the river. And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying unto Aaron, take the rod and stretch out thy hand upon the waters of Egypt, upon their streams, upon their rivers, upon their ponds, and upon all their pools of water, that they may become blood, and that there may be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, both in vessels of wood and in vessels of stone. And Moses and Aaron did as Yahweh commanded, and he lifted up the rod and smote the waters that were in the river in the sight of Pharaoh, and in the sight of his servants, and all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood, and the fish that was in the river died, and the river stank. And the Egyptians could not drink of the water of the river, and there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened. In other words, what you're doing is just a cheap magician's trick. You're not a god. You're not. It ain't the Most High that's doing this. You're just using a magician's trick, because my magicians can do it too. Escalate. It's going to escalate again, and of course, because of it, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Neither did he hearken unto them as Yahweh had said. And Pharaoh turned and went into his house. Neither did he set his heart to this also. And all the Egyptians digged round about the river for water to drink, for they could not drink of the water of the river. They had to dig wells. And 7 days were fulfilled after that Yahweh had smitten the river. Then here comes another plague. Frogs and lice. And when you go back in, and again, if you go look up their gods, they represent a lot of these things. And so these are really kind of against them, and there's nothing that their gods, little g gods, can do. And Yahweh spake unto Moses, go unto Pharaoh, and say unto him, thus saith Yahweh, let my people go, that they may serve me. And if thou refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs. And the rivers shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into thy house, and under thy bedchamber, and upon thy bed, and under thy house, and of thy servants, and upon the people. And of course he did, and the magicians did so with their enchantments, and brought up frogs upon the land of Egypt. And then the Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron, and said, because they could not, they could call frogs out and all that stuff, but they couldn't stop what Elohim had did. They couldn't reverse it. They could only duplicate these things, but they could not reverse them. They couldn't make it stop. And of course, he says, if you'll, get him to relent and call these frogs back out, I'll let you go off in the wilderness and worship Elohim. But then he changed his mind. Of course, he got, the father hardened his heart. And he said, tomorrow, and he said, be it according to thy word, that thou mayest know that there is none like unto Yahweh or Elohim. And the frogs shall depart from thee, and from thy houses, and from thy servants, and from the people. They shall remain in the river only. And Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moses cried unto Yahweh because of the frogs which he had brought against Pharaoh. And Yahweh did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, and out of the villages, and out of the fields. And they gathered them together upon heaps, and the land stank. But when Pharaoh saw that there was respite, he hardened his heart, and hearkened not unto them, as Yahweh had said. And Yahweh said unto Moses, say unto Aaron, stretch out thy rod, and smite the dust of the land, that it may become lice. uh, and of course in the margin here, it says fleas or gnats. That it may become lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And they did so, for Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod and smote the dust of the earth, and it became lice in man and in beast. All the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments to bring forth lice, but they could not. So there was lice upon man and upon beast, and they found out now they could not duplicate this. They couldn't go out there and smite the dust, and then all these lice or gnats or whatever they were come along. And then let's see. Let me put this back over here and go back to Revelation here. And let's see. This is in 2 Timothy. I'm looking in the wrong spot there. Let me get back here. All right. And of course, we'll see where now this is not in the same order exactly, but it the next plague says those were 3 of the trumpet sounds, the waters turning to blood and stuff, and hell coming down, because there'll be a section there in the Exodus where there's hell and all that too. And the 4th angel sounded, and the 3rd part of the sun was smitten, and the 3rd part of the moon, and the 3rd part of the stars, so as the 3rd part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a 3rd part of it, and the night likewise. And if you listen to these people, the powers that be, the Department of Defense, because they're the ones that are behind the weather modification stuff, that they're trying to counter. See, they're escalating this by trying to counter his judgments, like droughts and stuff like that. Because if you read in Deuteronomy 28, that's part of the progression of judgments, is droughts. The earth will become like iron and the sky like brass. You won't get no rain, and the ground is, and that's what's happening here. I mean, the ground hard as a rock, dry as a bone. It's so dry that the leaves are falling off the trees. They're in such distress. And I mean, we ain't had no cold to cause the leaves to fall. No, it's a lack of moisture and the distress of heat is causing them to shed their leaves. I mean, they're just everywhere. And it's the same kind of thing. They are talking about dimming out the sky, dimming out the sun. They're going to dump all this stuff in the air to try to dim the sun out. Because the sun, according to Scripture, is controlled by an entity. And he can modify the output of the sun to be whatever frequency or output of light that he wants, according to the command that he gets from above. And that's why it's changed from being yellow, which is life-giving light, to this white, death-giving light. I mean, this is brutal. I mean, it's brutally hot. And it's white hot. I mean, it's a white, and the white blue side of things is always hotter than the yellower, orange, red side of it. The infrared, toward the infrared, or when you get toward the violet side, it gets hotter. And so it can be controlled. Same thing with the moon. The light of the moon can be altered. I've seen it, do some strange stuff in the last few years. And of course, a lot of people say, "Oh, you're crazy, man." No, I've seen, the moon usually always follows the direction of the sun. If the sun, comes up and goes this way, the moon comes up and goes that way. But I've seen it go that way. Like a 90-degree angle difference. And also, just the other week, I think they call it apogee or perigee or something like that, when you see the moon during the day, you know. And it was a half moon, it was half lit up. The other half was blue, the same color blue as the sky. Now, what would that, you know, if it's 240,000 miles out into space, blackness of space, then it would seem to me that other half would be black, like space. But no, it was blue like the sky. Same color blue. So, I mean, it's way closer. It's in here with us, and it's way closer than people realize. You know, and why people can't see that? Because they're blind. They're spiritually blind and deaf, and they don't have a heart with understanding. Because it's, you know, and that's one thing, whenever, I don't know, about 7 or 8 years ago, when, you know, my chastisement, my eyes was opened. I mean, like I say, I've been reading the scriptures and stuff all my life, but just so many things that I believed was true, I come to find out was a lie. But for some people, it's hard for them to accept it. You know, I mean, they really, it just totally upsets their paradigm, and so they can't really, you know, they finally do come to accept it. You know, but for me, I had no problem accepting it. You know, that the earth is flat, fixed, and unmoving, has a dome over it called the firmament, that the sun, the moon, and the stars are inside of here with us, that the stars are not what, you know, NASA and them, you know, the deceiver tells us. I mean, I explained that to a lady the other day, that, you know, she was telling me somebody she knew had worked at NASA or something. I said, well, you know what the word NASA means, don't you, in Hebrew? I said, it means deceiver. I said, and that's exactly what they are. I said, everything they have been telling people is a lie. You know, and they were founded by Freemasons and Nazis. You know, occultic Nazis, occultic Masons. That ought to tell people something right there. That ought to be a big flag. But apparently, you know, these people, because they would not they don't have a love of the truth. See, people lie to themselves. They lie to themselves because they cannot face up to what this says about what is going to happen and what will happen to you if you don't believe what this says. If you don't accept it, they can't. They just kind of, and you know, and he tells us, you know, because they would not receive the love of the truth, for this cause they're given over to a strong delusion to believe a lie. And of course, it's a, you know, I believe it's a multifaceted lie that they're believing, and they're blinded, you know, because of it. And so they can't see this stuff. You know, I mean, you would think if you look up there and you saw that you would start, if you had any critical thinking skill, you would be like, wait a minute, man. I'm seeing sky there when I should be seeing the darkness of space. How am I seeing blue sky through the surface of the moon? You know, and they'll try to say, oh, well, that's just a reflection effect, you know, from the sunlight, you know, reflecting off of the sky, and it's projecting it onto the side of the moon. Well, the whole thing would be like that. There wouldn't be a part of it white, you know, lit up, and the other half blue. The whole thing would be blue. You wouldn't even probably see it then. Because if it was all blue, no, you know, they oh, don't believe your lying eyes, man. Don't believe what your eyes are telling you. You believe what I tell you. And that's exactly what's happened to people is trust the science. Believe the science. And that's exactly where people are. And that's why this stuff escalates. Because they will not accept the truth of it. And so they continue, these evil people, these tares, continue to try and thwart his judgments. And what it ends up doing is it backfires. It's like this weather modification stuff. Now they have to keep doing it because they have so messed up the hydrological cycle, trying to thwart Elohim's judgments. So, the reason that he starts out, he tells you, in Deuteronomy there, how he will start out, with these judgments, and they get worse and worse, progressively worse, until people become cannibals and begin to start eating one another. I mean, that's just how bad it will get, because they go insane. It says it leads to madness. And, well, we see it. I mean, we can see madness all around. And of course, so, and it, over here, back in Exodus, they go through these plagues of the frogs and lice, and also, back here in Revelation, it talks about I think it's in Revelation chapter. Let me go back here. I think it's in chapter 12. Yeah, chapter 16. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs. You got the frog thing going on here. Now, they're not coming out of the river and invading everything, but it's talking about these frogs going out to gather them to the battle of the great day of Elohim Almighty. And so, you have a lot of these tie-ins. And I was looking at, doing a little bit of research, and I come across this. I was looking into about Babylon here, and they were saying, they were preterists. I'm presuming they were preterists by what they were saying, that everything in here has all been fulfilled. It was fulfilled at Jerusalem in 70 A.D., with the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple by the Romans. And but I believe that, as I've said before, that most prophecy is dual prophecy. That a lot of these things did happen at Jerusalem, and there was other things that happened there when it was destroyed. And it talks about them fleeing to the mountains, and they did, the Christians, that because Yahushua told them in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, when you see these things begin to come, take place, flee unto the mountains. When you see armies encamped about Jerusalem, and it did, Titus, Vespasian, with the 9th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and 15th legions, circled around Jerusalem. They began circling around there. I think it was in like 69 A.D. and it culminated in 70 A.D. with the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. But because they use Revelation chapter, I think it's, let's see, back here, chapter 8, I think. Wait a minute, chapter 10, verse 8. Yeah. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street. This is in Revelation chapter 11, verse 8. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified, which is Jerusalem. Okay, and but this is talking about the two prophets. Well, there's nothing, in here anywhere about the destruction of Jerusalem. Now you can read, historians like Josephus and stuff, and he talks about it. But in here, if this was written, like the preterists try to say that this was written around the same time as the destruction of Jerusalem, and that's what they're talking about. Well, it's not. I mean, this was purportedly written somewhere between 90 and 96 A.D. And Diocletian was the Roman emperor at the time. And they just don't, a lot of the stuff just doesn't fit with, the destruction of Jerusalem, because at that time, I think it was Vespasian. Vespasian became the emperor because after Nero, which was around, I think he was emperor around up until around 57, 59 AD, and then he took his own life or something, and then they was like one after him he was emperor for a while, 7 or 8 years or something, but then the ones after that, they all died real quick. I mean, they got assassinated or whatever. And then the one that was the emperor, when Vespasian, he was a general that was over there leading the campaign in Israel, and his son was with him, and he was the head over one of the legions, and Vespasian was the head over all the legions. He was like the general of the armies or whatever. And there had been a decree put out by that emperor at that time to kill Vespasian because he refused to do something that he wanted him to do. I can't remember what it was, but it was something that he knew would really cause the people in Israel to really rise up, and they were trying to avoid that. They were trying to get them to just kind of go along and say, look, just submit. We'll treat you all right. You can still rule over yourselves. You'll just be a vassal of the Roman Empire. Well, he refused to do what that emperor wanted. Well, he put out a decree to have him killed, and of course that emperor was killed himself. Somebody, offed him, one of the assassins, and offed him. And so Vespasian heard about it, and by the time, apparently he had sources of information that were faster than the information from the other emperor. And so he went back to Rome and he became emperor. And his son was made to a general or whatever and told to continue the campaign or whatever. And so just a lot of it doesn't fit with the procession of these generals. And of course some people say, well, that area over there, that there's 7, when you look at, I think it's Revelation 18 or 16, let's see, let me look back here, that the harlot that's on the beast, and it says that she sits upon 7 hills, and there's 7 kings, 5 have fallen, and 1 is yet to come. And here it is right here. It says, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. Now, this, and it says, and the 7, and the beast that was and is not is even of the 7th, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns, which, but anyway, back up here, it says, the beast that thou sawest shall rise up out of the, and it's, anyway, that it sits on 7 hills. I think there's more than one Babylon. I think there is 4 of them. And altogether, I think Rome is 1, London is 1, New York is, or Washington is 1, and Jerusalem. And because, where I read there in chapter 8, where it says, called spiritually Sodom and Egypt, where our Mashiach was killed, which that would be Jerusalem. But the reason that I don't think all this was fulfilled back then is because there's things that it talks about happening that could not have happened back then. They didn't have the ability to do it. Like the mark of the beast system. Because it's all rich and poor, free and bond to receive a mark. And if they don't, they can't buy or sell. Well, yeah, they could have done something like that back there in Rome, but you could have easily went somewhere else. No, it talks about every nation, kindred, and tongue of the whole world. Well, the Romans did not control the whole world. I mean, you got what was it, empire. There was another empire that they were in conflict with that they never conquered, and that actually they were the Persians and the Elamites, and probably the Medes and some others that were joined together. And I can't, if I wasn't trying to think of it, I could tell you. It starts with a P, but it's not Phoenicians. It's the but anyway, you could have fled to one of them places, and gotten away from any kind of mark like that or whatever. But in the context of what it says in here, you can't get away from it. And not only that, I was listening to Robert Kennedy Jr. the other day, and he was talking about this constellation of satellites that they put up here, like 365,000 of them, to watch every square inch of the earth. And artificial intelligence, all that kind of stuff. If all this was fulfilled back then where is that stuff coming from? And I mean, in the Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, it talks about all that kind of stuff going on. And if the days were not shortened, no flesh would be spared. Well, that was not possible back then. That was not possible. They didn't have nuclear weapons. They didn't have, neutron bombs. They didn't have hydrogen bombs. They didn't have atomic bombs. They didn't have that stuff to where they could conceivably wipe out all life. All flesh. All flesh means all, not just human beings, but animals, plant, every living thing. They didn't have that capability. And so, a lot of these things that it talks about in here is our doing, and we're, man is trying to counter his judgments. And what that does is it's escalation. They're escalating it. And it's just like when it talks about there, where I was reading about the trumpets, how the fifth angel sounded and the bottomless pits opened up, and I believe that, it says, I saw an angel coming, a star coming down, fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. Well, who is the angel over the bottomless pit? Hasatan. He comes down, he's got the key to the bottomless pit, and he opens it up and he lets out his Nephilim prodigy. It says, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon, or Apollo. So, they and then it talks about these beasts, these things coming up out of there, but out of the pit, these chimera hybrids or whatever, coming up out of there, and they're over there right now at CERN. They are working overtime to try to open it, and I think that Hasatan comes down here and he gives them the knowledge, the key that they need to open up the bottomless pit. And that's exactly what they do. And of course it brings about more judgments. And it talks about one woe is past, and that's one of the woes of the three woes. Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the voices of the trumpet of the three angels which are yet to sound. And of course, then you have the one that sounds and the bottomless pit's opened up. And then you get the fifth angel. That was the fifth angel. Then the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the the golden altar which is before Elohim, saying to the sixth angel, which had the trumpet, loosed the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. Okay, and it's and the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them, that's 200 million. And of course, the only peoples that I know of that can pull together an army of that kind of size is, of course, in Amos, I think it is, or no, Joel talks about Joel's army, and it's an army of chimeras, horsemen, and so they've been prepared. And it's, it's probably these ones that are coming up out of the bottomless pit, and they're going to be leading them. And but anyhow, I'm getting off track here, but you can see how these things happen. And then when you go and start looking at the bowl judgments, back here in Revelation 18, I think it is, or 16, 16. The vials of wrath, and he says that his people are not appointed unto wrath, which is the last judgments, the bowl or vial judgments, which are poured out on unrepentant man, and that's when the Euphrates River gets dried up, to make way for the kings of the east, and that's when all them armies from the east march over into the Middle East, over to Armageddon, and it talks about all these things. I'm going to go back here again, back to Exodus, and look at what it says about some of these other plagues, the plagues of frogs and lice, and it talks about there in Revelation, whenever these final judgments start, the vials, that they same kind of thing, plagues of flies and murrains, which a murrain is some kind of disease that affects animals and stuff. And so, that's what happens to these people here. And it says, and it shall come to pass, small dust in all the land of Egypt, and shall be a boil breaking forth with blains upon man and upon beast. And it talks about that in Revelation, about where the people that take the mark of the beast, they're going to get these sores that are going to break out all over them. They're like boils or whatever, because of taking that mark and worshiping the beast. And so it says, and there's boils in hell. Same thing. It talks about hell in there coming down, the size of a talent onto the earth. And it says in and here it says, and this is in chapter 9 of Exodus, verse 10, and they took ashes of the furnace and stood before Pharaoh, and Moses sprinkled it up toward heaven, and it became a boil breaking forth with blains upon man and upon beast. And the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boil was upon the magicians and upon all the Egyptians. See, the magicians trying to thwart or trying to counter and mimic what the Father was doing, just escalated it. He says, okay, you want to try and, counter what I do, you want to try to thwart what I do as judgments on you, okay, I'm going to escalate it. And he escalated it, and it not only did it affect all the people of Egypt, but it affected the magicians too. Janus and Jambres affected them too. They couldn't do nothing about it. And that's what's going to be taking place around here. It says, and Yahweh hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he hearkened not unto them, as Yahweh had spoken unto Moses. And Yahweh said unto Moses, rise up early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh, and say unto him, thus saith Yahweh Elohim of the Hebrews, let my people go, that they may serve me. For I will at this time send all my plagues upon thy heart, and upon thy servants, and upon thy people, that thou mayest know that there is none like me in all the earth. For now I will stretch out my hand, that I may smite thee and thy people with pestilence, and thou shalt be cut off from the earth. And in very deed, for this cause have I raised thee up, for to show in thee my power, and that my name may be declared throughout all the earth. And now this Pharaoh was a Pharaoh that did not know Joseph. He was one of them. He was they called him Hakiels or something like that. They were a dynasty of pharaohs that were not Egyptian. I think they were Assyrians. The Assyrians play a big role in all this stuff too. But it says, as yet exaltest thou thyself against my people, that thou wilt not let them go. Behold, tomorrow about this time I will cause it to rain a very grievous hail, such as had not been in Egypt since the foundation thereof, even unto now. Send therefore now and gather thy cattle and all that thou hast in the field, for upon every man and beast which shall be found in the field, and shall not be brought home, the hail shall come down upon them, and they shall die. He that feared the word of Yahweh among the servants of Pharaoh made his servants and his cattle flee into the houses. And he that regarded not the word of Yahweh left his servants and his cattle in the field. And Yahweh said unto Moses, stretch forth thy hand toward heaven, that there may be hail in all the land of Egypt, upon man and upon beast, and upon every herb of the field throughout the land of Egypt. And Moses stretched forth his rod toward heaven, and Yahweh sent thunder and hail, and the fire ran along upon the ground. And Yahweh rained hail upon the land of Egypt, and there was hail and fire mingled with the hail, very grievous, such as there was none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. And the hail smote throughout all the land of Egypt, all that was in the field, both man and beast. And the hail smote every herb of the field, and brake every tree of the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, was there no hail. You see, I mean, he protects his own. And of course, Pharaoh calls, and he says, calls Moses and Aaron, and he said unto them, I have sinned this time. Yahweh is righteous, and I and my people are wicked. Entreat Yahweh, for it is enough that there be no more mighty thunderings and hail, and I will let you go, and ye shall stay no longer. And Moses said unto him, As soon as I am gone out of the city, I will spread abroad my hands unto Yahweh, and the thunder shall cease. Neither shall there be any more hail, that thou mayest know how that the earth is Yahweh's. But as for thee and thy servants, I know that ye will not yet fear Yahweh Elohim. And the flax and the barley was smitten, for the barley was in the ear, and the flax was bold. But the wheat and the rye were not smitten, for they were not grown up. And Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh, and spread abroad his hands unto Yahweh. And the thunders and hail ceased, and the rain was not poured upon the earth. And when Pharaoh saw that the rain and hail and the thunders were ceased, he sinned yet more, and hardened his heart, he and his servants. And the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, neither would he let the children of Israel go, as Yahweh had spoken by Moses. And when you go back around here to Revelations, and this is during the vials. The vial judgments, the vials of wrath. It says, and I heard a great voice out of the temple saying to the seven angels, Go your ways and pour out the vials of the wrath of Elohim upon the earth. And the first went and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image. The boils, these sores, boils. And the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as the blood of a dead man, and every living soul in the sea died. And the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and fountains of water, and they became blood. And I heard the angel of the waters say, Thou art righteous, O Yahweh, which art and was and shalt be, because thou hast judged thus. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. And I heard another out of the altar say, Even so, Yahweh Elohim Almighty, true and righteous are thy judgments. And the fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and power was given unto him to scorch men with fire. And I think we're already seeing a taste of it. That what we're seeing with the sun right now, white hot, is a taste of what is to come. Unless people repent. And I'm not just talking about in just a few individuals here. I'm talking about collectively. Mankind needs to repent, because these vile judgments, when they come, is on the people who are unrepentant, and we're not going to be a part of that. We're not appointed unto his wrath. Yeah, we're going to go through tribulation, and we're going to go through some judgments and stuff, we're not exempt from it. But his wrath, whenever he, the day of the Lord, the day of Yahuwah, which is spoken about in Amos and Joel and, in other Old Testament prophetic books, it's talking about wrath. That's what it's talking about. It even tell if you go back and look at it, it talks about these things. And it says, and men were scorched with great heat and blasphemed the name of Elohim, which hath power over these plagues, and they repented not to give him glory. And it escalates. When they could repent, and he would relent, just like he did there with Pharaoh. Pharaoh would say, "Okay, I admit I sinned, and I'm gonna quit." And the father would back off. He would relent. But then Pharaoh would harden his heart and say, "I'm not letting y'all go." And it escalated. It's escalation. It escalates. And it's going to continue to do that until the return of Mashiach. Because these people, you can see what it says there, instead of repenting, they blaspheme him. They blaspheme him. And then the fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, and his kingdom was full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues for pain. Now let's go back here again. And look here. And of course this is, they have a plague of locusts, which is similar to when the bottomless pits opened up. It describes them chimeras like locusts, and they come out, and these here are devouring locusts. They come out and they eat up everything. But it's very similar type of plague. And then you have the plague of darkness. And it says, and the locusts went up, but here's the plague, went up over all the land of Egypt and rested in all the coast of Egypt. Very grievous were they. Before them there was no such locust as they, neither after them shall be such. For they covered the whole for they covered the face of the whole earth, so that the land was darkened, and they did eat every herb of the land and all the fruit of the trees, which the hail had not left, because the hail beat everything up, all the fruit trees and all the palm trees and all the, everything. And what it had left, them locusts took care of the rest. And of course, then he called on Moses again, the Pharaoh did. And, Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron in haste and he said, I have sinned against the Yahweh your Elohim and against you. Now therefore forgive, I pray thee, my sin only this once, and entreat Yahweh your Elohim that he may take away from me this death only. And he went out from Pharaoh and entreated the Lord, Yahweh. And Yahweh turned a mighty strong west wind, which took away the locusts and cast them into the Red Sea. There remained not one locust in all the coast of Egypt. But Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart, so that he would not let the children of Israel go. And Yahweh said unto Moses, stretch out thy hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt. And then when you come back around here, it says, and the fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, and his kingdom was full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues for pain, and blasphemed the Elohim of heaven because of their pains and their sores, and repented not of their deeds. And, if they would just repent, he would relent. Repent so that he may relent. He don't want to do this. I mean, the last thing in the world is he wants to cause suffering and pain and all these things to befall man. But he's righteous, and his righteousness, in the light of sin, the response of it is judgment. I mean, and there is a prescribed judgment for sin, a prescribed sequence of it. Deuteronomy chapter 28. I mean, it lays it out. And it escalates. The further you get along, the more it escalates. And so this darkness takes them over, and I mean the same thing back here. This darkness, and I mean it's a darkness that's so heavy that it can be felt. And so they plague of darkness, and then here, and the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth into the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. Now, how can that have happened back in 70 AD? He's saying that they go out to gather the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of Elohim Almighty. This could not have all been fulfilled in 70 AD. And of course, and at the seventh vial is a great earthquake. Now, there wasn't an earthquake back then, but there was rumblings and thunderings and lightnings and stuff going on back here. They'll be going on in here. But that seventh vial, when it's poured out, is an earthquake such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. And the great city was divided into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon came in remembrance before Elohim, to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent. And men blasphemed Elohim because of the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great. And so you can see, I mean, they're not necessarily all in the exact same order, but the type. Exodus, Egypt, those plagues and all that stuff was a type. And the death angel, the destroyer, I mean, here it talks about the destroyer. The Passover, when the Passover happened and the destroyer came, and he told them what to do to prepare for it. Put the blood on the lintel and the doorpost. For Yahweh will pass through to smite the Egyptians, and when he seeth the blood upon the lintel and on the two side posts, Yahweh will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your houses to smite you. And we'll go back here to Revelation, and this here, when it talks about the king over the bottomless pit coming out, whose name is Hebrew is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue he hath Apollyon. Those mean destroyer. They are the destroyer. And he turns them loose on people whenever they defy him. And that's what he's going to be doing here. He's going to be turning loose the destroyer. And he's going to come out and lead the world to destruction. If your name ain't written in the Lamb's Book of Life. That's exactly what's going to happen. But I just wanted to kind of show the order of these things, and how they are very similar. These judgments and all that, the things that happened there in Egypt are very similar to what is going to be going on during tribulation and great tribulation. And a lot of them, like today, back then, it was Yahuwah was doing it. Now, a lot of this stuff is going to be from our own hands. Trying to manipulate the weather, trying to, building all these weapons of mass destruction, building all of these like directed energy weapons, these HARP systems that are just messing with everything. All these microwave systems they're putting in everywhere, this 5G and all that stuff. All of that stuff is affecting our health, affecting our thinking. It's affecting every aspect of us. And the fluoridation of our water is messing with our pineal gland, that is trying to interfere with our ability to hear what our Father and the Ruach is saying to us. And there is ways that you can decalcify your pineal gland and your brain from the attack of fluoride on us, and then you can begin to hear clearly. That's why they've been doing this. They don't want people to hear. That's why these people are blind. They can, and they can be led anywhere. They can be convinced of anything by these people. They're deceived by it. And one of the things that, that, like I said last time about the ayahuasca and DMT, that's another way they're going to be using that stuff to deceive people, where they'll be, going, it kind of transports them into this other dimension where these demonic forces are at, and they're seeing them and hearing them, and they're telling them to worship them. And in Revelation it says they would not, they wouldn't stop worshiping devils. And Paul talks about it too. They wouldn't quit worshiping these devils. And devils are demons. These demonic entities. So I'm gonna put these in there. I mean, I recommend you read all of those, the chapters in Exodus. I think it's like Exodus 8 through like 12 or something like that, where it talks about all these places. And then read, Revelation 8, 12, 16, 18, which lays it out. But like I said, I think Babylon is in these times now, in the latter days, is a type for the system. It's the whole system, the religious, the political, military, the economic. They're all like a pyramid, and in the center of it is Jerusalem. It's a wicked place too. And like I said about there in Isaiah, where the Father says He will draw His people, the Israel, the scattered Israel, and the Jews, back together, the two sticks. He will do it, not the Rothschilds, not the Zionists. He Himself will do it. He will put it in their heart and mind to return back over there to the wilderness, and He will plead with them there. And so with that, I'm going to call it a day. I just kind of hope that will get you to thinking about this thing and things we're seeing. But don't let your heart be troubled by it. What we can gather from that is that the return of the Hamashiach is very close. It's very close. We're not far away from it. Now, yeah, we're going to probably have to go through some stuff, may even die. But, that's death is as much a part of life as living. And you got to remember that we're all appointed to death. The physical death, the first death. Everybody is. But is your life more important than everlasting life? Is this little short life that you live now, this little physical short life that we live, is it so important that you live another minute, another hour, another day, that you would trade that for eternal life? You have to think about that. And put on the whole armor of Elohim. Ephesians 6. That you might be able to stand in the evil day. Having done all to stand. Stand. Because we're getting ready to find out. I mean, we can see, the persecution of the believers and this seventh, the Sunday Sabbath stuff that they're getting, they're trying their best to get that established. And that's another thing. I mean, that wasn't a thing over there back then in 70 AD. I mean, the Jews, they still kept the Sabbath, the seventh day Sabbath. So they, but this sixth day, this first day of the week Sabbath that they're going to be trying to enforce, they're going to make it into law, just like Constantine did in 337 or somewhere along in there. Same thing. So with that, I love you folks. I hope that you will be blessed and have a fruitful and productive week, and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. And I love you, and I hope that you will get something out of this to see how things escalate because of sin, because of disobedience, because of rebellion. And that's why things seem to be escalating around the world, because man refuses to repent. I mean, collectively. And I mean, just look at the chaos and the political chaos, the military chaos going on. I mean, everything, which is going to lead to a greater escalation. And with that, I love you folks, and I'll see you again on the next Shabbat if Yahuwah is willing.